working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching ASEAN in Focus on tonight's headlines. The Senate concurred in the ratification of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. A total of 20 senators voted in favor of Senate Resolution 485, ratifying the biggest free trade agreement, or FTA, between the ASEAN nations. Thailand will hold a general election in May, Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha said, with unofficial campaigning already underway. And the EU imposed asset freezes and visa bans on Myanmar's energy minister, influential businessmen, and high-ranking military officers over an ongoing crackdown on opponents 2 years after the coup. And Thailand will ban all plastic waste imports by 2025 in a three-stage plan as part of a greater plastic reduction movement to control pollution and protect people's health. We start here in the country. The House of Representatives adopted on Tuesday afternoon, February 21, a resolution expressing the Chamber's full support for the immediate ratification of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership deal. Senior Deputy Majority Leader and Ilocos Norte 1st District Representative Sandro Marcos, an author of the measure, delivered a sponsorship speech in the floor prior to its adoption. First, listen in.
I rise with utmost honor and privilege to sponsor House Resolution number 728, expressing the full support of the House of Representatives for the immediate ratification of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, or RCEP. From the foundational activities of the RCEP in 2012 up until its formal inception at the ASEAN Virtual Summit, hosted by Vietnam on November the 15th, 2020, its unwavering objectives revolved around the establishment of a mutually beneficial economic multilateral framework in the Asia-Pacific region. The RCEP agreement is a manifestation of the member countries' resolve to hasten the opening of markets, reinforce regional economic integration, commit to an inclusive and rules-based multilateral trading system, and most importantly, contribute to the world efforts of salvaging plummeting economies due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The Philippines, consistent with its constitutional mandate to pursue a trade policy that utilizes all forms of and arrangements of exchange on the basis of equality and reciprocity, has long been a signatory to various free trade agreements, including the 2010 ASEAN Trading Goods Agreement, Philippines-Japan Economic Partnership Agreement, and the Philippines-European Free Trade Association Free Trade Agreement. Even with the existing bilateral trade agreements that the Philippines has fostered with the ASEAN and RCEP member countries, the RCEP agreement was simultaneously launched to complement the country's bilateral agreements and resolve the negative impacts of the overlapping FTAs with regard to the levels of commitment for tariff reduction and trade rules. As a preview to the beneficial and favorable prospect of our formal accession to the RCEP is the recent successful and productive state visits to Singapore, Indonesia, and China of President Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr. The local business leaders in these ASEAN countries have pledged several investments totaling to billions of pesos worth of foreign direct investments.
Even with the sensitive lists of tariff rate quotas, as mentioned by our colleague in the annexes, by Senator Chis Escudero, the paper estimated that the Philippines' balance of trade in goods will deteriorate by a minimum of 1.1% or a loss of USD 260 million per annum. So it will get quite a bit worse before it gets any better.
Exports in RCEP countries increased, particularly Vietnam, 16.4% with a total value of $108 billion. Nag-increase. And you know, we're trying to catch up with Vietnam. Thailand, Your Honor, it increased by 7.1% in 2022 alone, soon as they had ratified their treaty. That's about $300 billion US, Mr. President.
Eto nga, ang problema. Nakita natin sa rice tarification law, may fund na sinasabi. Yet studies show that the income of farmers fell by 40%. How do we ensure that the measures indicated will indeed protect the vulnerable
I think
sectors?
they're worried about opening up their markets to China, which is a more sophisticated, has a more sophisticated manufacturing system, which probably they feel in India they cannot compete with, no? Especially with the larger population that's growing in India. They might lose out on these markets. I just want to put on record, Thailand spends double in their agriculture than Philippines. Double. So maybe in the next budget cycle, with the help of Senator Aimee, with the help of all of us here, let's double the budget of agriculture and let's make sure that it goes to the right programs.
What if isite nung RCEP countries a very specific provision, Article 8.5.2, na an RCEP member country such as the Philippines cannot restrict the amount of a service. Ganon po ka-konkreto at ganon ka-specific.
I'm sure the oppositors are still opposing it.
Yes.
I am certain that my white hair did not convince them to be for RCEP.
Your beauty.
In
Correct.
terms of eliminating smuggling, why does it still exist despite years and decades of giving help to farmers who cannot even access the Rice Competitiveness Enhancement Fund, even if the law of price tarification is supposedly a good law.
Correct.
Now, but why do I believe that we must join RCEP? We are the only country in ASEAN who will not join RCEP, and the products that we produced in a certain product line, Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar will export to China, South Korea, Japan, and the tariffs will go down. And in the Philippines, if we do not join RCEP in the years to come, the tariffs will still be the way it is based on our existing free trade agreements, whether bilateral or as an ASEAN FTA. So I believe that these are vast economic opportunities for these sectors, but it is up to us to make it work. O tama na sabi ni Senate President.
Now, Senate President Pro Tempore Lorna Regina or Lauren Legarda and Senate President Juan Miguel Zubiri sponsored the RCEP ratification. Legarda gave assurances that an oversight committee will be created to address the issues on micro, small, and medium enterprises, science and technology, agriculture, trade and industry, and other sectors. She also said resolutory clauses were included and made part of the concurring resolution to the RCEP agreement. The Marcos administration is putting a premium on individuals belonging to the poor and vulnerable sectors who are bearing the brunt of increasing prices of basic commodities, one of the country's economic managers said. In a palace briefing, Socio-Economic Planning Secretary Arsenio Balisacan said the government is doing its best to help the indigent Filipinos badly affected by the soaring inflation. Take a look.
Yan is siyempre lahat tayo ay naapektahan differently dun sa inflation, no? On the one hand, we are trying to work out na yung inflation na yan ay mababa in the coming months, no? Pas naman adversely, no? Lalo na yung mga very poor and vulnerable groups, yun ang talagang pagbuhusan natin ng assistance, no? Hindi feasible na lahat naman na ibibigay ay pare-pareho yung treatment, no? Kasi as you know, our fiscal space is very limited, no? And so from yung approach natin, make sure that we are able to address yung kung saan nanggagaling yung inflation na yan, at yun ang ina-address natin ngayon. Yung inflation na yan, alam natin, nanggagaling sa mga forces na nangyari, like halimbawa mga typhoons that destroyed our crops. Merong nangyari na alam natin na kulang ng supply, pero hindi tayo nag-import or late na yung pagdating ng import to supplement yung local production. yun, pwede naman nating ma-address, no? We are not helpless there. I mean, and then we are doing our best to address those production issues and lalo na sa supply chain. Now, doon sa mga vulnerable talaga tayo nakafocus ngayon, kaya nga dinadalihan namin yung mga issues constraining yung digitalization natin kasi yun ang makakatulong sa ensure na yung mga limited assistance natin ay makakarating talaga sa mga dapat matulungan.
Now, he issued this statement when quizzed if the executive department is considering adopting the move of the Senate to provide one-time 50,000 peso inflation assistance to its 3,000 rank-and-file employees. On Monday, Senate President Juan Miguel Zubiri announced that the Senate would raise the one-time inflationary allowance to 50,000 from 12,000 pesos to shield its staff from the rising cost of essential commodities. The country's headline inflation rate in January this year ticked up to 8.7% from 8.1% in December last year, according to the recent Philippine Statistics Authority report. On February 7, President Marcos hoped that the drop in the prices of fuel and imported agricultural products would help tame inflation in the country. Thailand will ban all plastic waste imports by 2025 in a three-stage plan as part of a greater plastic reduction movement to control pollution and protect people's health. Take a look. Now, this year, only 14 manufacturers in Thailand's free trade zone that use scraps as raw materials are allowed to import plastic waste, which, however, must not exceed their combined production capacity. Thailand and other developing countries, especially in Southeast Asia, have acted as the dumping ground for foreign nations' trash for decades. Until 2017, China was the world's largest importer of plastic waste, bringing in an average of 8 million tons of plastic a year from more than 90 nations around the world. Now, to tackle the pressing plastic pollution crisis, the Chinese government introduced an import ban on solid waste, including several types of plastics and other recyclable waste. Since then, big exporters like the U.S., which was shipping about 4,000 containers of garbage to China every day before the ban came into effect, rerouted most of their trash to Southeast Asian nations such as Vietnam, Malaysia, and Thailand. According to Customs Department statistics, plastic waste imports in Thailand were 10 times higher than the average amount imported before 2015, surpassing 500,000 tons. Thailand will hold a general election in May, according to Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha, with unofficial campaigning now already underway. The embattled premier, who came to power as an army chief in a 2014 coup before taking over as the prime minister after a controversial 2019 election, told reporters he would dissolve parliament in March. Take a look.
ก็ประมาณนั้นแหละก็บอกแล้วว่าเดือนมีนาก็มีนาดิแล้วให้เวลาให้ทันกับพฤษภาให้มันสอดคล้องกันนะเพื่อให้สสเสนอเขามีเวลาขายอกขายใจเขาว่าไป
With the economy struggling and the vital tourism sector hit hard by the pandemic, the 68-year-old's popularity has been in the doldrums. But last month, he announced a re-election bid at a rally. Prayut will run under the banner of the newly created Ruam Thai Sang Chart Party, with current ruling party Palan Pracharat Party, or PPRP, last month naming Deputy Prime Minister Prawit Wongsuwan as its candidate for Prime Minister in the next election. Pheu Thai is polling well, but the current Thai constitution, drafted under junta rule, gives army-linked parties a strong advantage. Pheu Thai is expected to nominate Paitongtarn Shinawat, the daughter of former Premier Thaksin Shinawat, as one of its candidates for Prime Minister. Billionaire Tycoon Thaksin was ousted as Prime Minister back in 2006 in a coup and lives in self-imposed exile to avoid corruption charges he has said are politically motivated. Malaysia's Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim asked Thailand to play a bigger role in bringing stability to coup-hit Myanmar as diplomatic efforts to bring peace there flounder. Take a look.
there's very little we can do except to continue this so-called constructive engagement with the Myanmar junta. So, but I think you are placed, Prime Minister, in a better position to express many of our concerns that the issue, the internal issue in Myanmar has to be resolved internally. But we will, of course, suggest that ASEAN takes a coherent, concerted action together as a region, as a regional body. I've discussed this, as I've told Prime Minister Prayut with President Jokowi and with Shenlu.
Prime Minister Anwar held his first bilateral meeting with Thai Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha since the former won office late last year. The Thai government has faced international criticism for maintaining normalized ties with Myanmar's junta and for downplaying alleged atrocities in its neighbor since the country was plunged into chaos following a putsch 2 years ago. Late last year, Thailand raised eyebrows when it hosted Myanmar's top diplomat at informal talks that included Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, but excluded other ASEAN countries that had been vocal critics of the junta. It was the first time in more than a year that Myanmar's foreign minister met an ASEAN foreign minister grouping in person after the bloc snubbed the junta from top-level summits over lack of progress on ASEAN's peace plan. Now, Mr. Anwar said ASEAN needed coherent, concerted action on Myanmar. Meanwhile, the EU tonight imposed asset freezes and visa bans on Myanmar's energy minister, influential businessmen, and high-ranking military officers over an ongoing crackdown on opponents 2 years after the coup. The new batch of European Union sanctions hit 9 individuals and 7 entities tied to the ruling regime. The move by the 27-nation bloc followed similar sanctions from the United States and Britain around the second anniversary of the military coup that launched a violent campaign against democracy activists. The EU sanctions included Energy Minister Miao Min-u, Armed Forces Chief of Staff General Mong Mong-a, Navy Head Admiral Mo Ang, and the heads of 3 firms providing weapons to the military. Also listed were officials in Yangon region involved in the executions of 4 democracy activists back in July last year, and in Kachin State, where they oversaw airstrikes, massacres, raids, arson, according to the EU. The EU had already sanctioned a total of 93 individuals and 18 entities over the putsch and subsequent brutal crackdown in Myanmar. To Papua New Guinea now, where Prime Minister James Marape has appealed to all media houses to observe journalism ethics. Our correspondent from Papua New Guinea, Echo Orteleza, reports from Port Moresby.
Papua New Guinea's Prime Minister Honorable James Marape urges media organizations to deliver news responsibly. He expresses full support of the freedom of the media as enshrined in the Constitution of Papua New Guinea. However, he calls the attention of media practitioners to report news responsibly and not to dwell on hearsay or own opinions. The Prime Minister says the influx of fake news will not lead the citizens to correct knowledge and directions.
I call upon all in the media fraternity. This is a big need in the world of real-time information transactions. Sometimes truth and correct information comes at the back of all the hearsays that runs fast. This country needs correct information that lifts our people, encourages our people, points our people to the right directions. If they're asking for answers, provide answers for them. And if you don't have answers, then ask those of us who have answers. Government should have almost all answers for every need of our society, and I bring to you a full commitment of government again, whether it's unemployment, or whether it's education, or whether it's business, or whether it's economy, or whether it's health. Government should have all answers, even if it is not 100% satisfactory, but answers to what is happening and what will happen is government's business. We look forward to partnering you in the media to ensure our people are better informed And of course, the media too. It is your responsibility to correctly hold all of us accountable, especially those of us who have been mandated to do work for our people.
Prime Minister Marape furthermore asks media organizations to not lose sight or focus and to be the beacon of correct information for the nation. True and fair reporting defines responsible journalism. Echo Hortaleza Quinola, Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea, Eagle News, we live in extraordinary times.
A potential change for online content platforms as the U.S. Supreme Court takes up two cases with huge implications for the sector. Take a look. Now, the first is on lawsuit against Google on YouTube over the November 2015 terrorist attacks, with one victim's family accusing the site of spreading Islamic State group propaganda. The second, a similar suit against Google, Facebook, and Twitter over a 2017 terror attack on an Istanbul nightclub. Now, both are calling the Section 230 or 230 part of the Communications Decency Act of 1996. Now, that states that online platforms hosting user-generated content are not that content's publisher and thus aren't legally liable for it. Section 230 also protects platforms from lawsuits when they do take down posts. The justices were also concerned that changing the rules would open a floodgate of lawsuits and seriously jeopardize the carrying out of business on the internet. Justice Brett Kavanaugh referred to complaints that a rethinking of Section 230 would invite economic dislocation and really crash the digital economy with all sorts of effects on workers and consumers. Now, the president of the Computer and Communications Industry Association, or CCIA, whose members include Google, Meta, Facebook, and Twitter, said that companies are walking a fine line on content moderation. Take a look.
So in the 90s, Congress realized that users of digital services were going to generate an extraordinary amount of content, and they wanted those services to take steps to protect their users without the risk that every individual decision that service made would expose it to extraordinary legal liability, hence Section 230. We want companies to moderate, to take action against content that violates their terms, that makes their communities less safe. But they're not going to get every single call right. And if courts penalize companies that miss needles in haystacks, that sends a signal, don't look at all. And that turns the internet into a cesspool of dangerous content. What we have learned over time is that responsible services can protect their users by taking steps against dangerous content. And we need to give them the legal flexibility to do that. If we ratchet up the liability rules and discourage them from rolling up their sleeves, from looking under the hood, so to speak, we actually make users less safe. Right? If we ratchet up liability rules, you get two potential results. One is that services over-moderate, over-filter, over-sanitize their content to ensure that there's no potential risk of liability. And the other is that they throw up their hands and abdicate responsibility. And so
In Hawaii, 17-year-old Arthur, along with his dad, recently worked on a dish that is best served when shared with friends or loved ones for that next social event. Prepare your taste buds for this feature. Take a look. Aloha, that looks delish. As my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles. We'll see you back tomorrow. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.